Hello, and welcome to the Liferay DXP Basics training course. This module will be covering gathering and addressing feedback. The module is targeted towards the business practitioner role, and it is built on Liferay DXP 7.3. Some key module takeaways. First, forms are a versatile tool that can be used to gather both internal and external feedback. And second, once submitted, form entries can be viewed, exported, and deleted depending on their desired applications. We're hoping to learn how to create forms and their element sets, and just as well, fill out and submit forms as a user. Some exercise prerequisites. First, you should have the Java JDK installed in order to run Liferay DXP. Make sure you have the JDK, not the JRE. The JRE does not have everything needed to run Liferay DXP. You will need the full Java development kit in order to run Tomcat and Liferay. Second, you should have unzipped all of the module exercise files into the following folder structure. If you're on Windows, put it on your C drive underneath the Liferay folder. If you're on a Unix system, that being Linux or Mac OS, put it in your user home underneath the Liferay folder. Third, you should have a running instance of Liferay DXP 7.3. Fourth, you should have the luxury hotel landing page site template created. This was created in previous modules if you've been following along. The instructions are located in the Creating Digital Experiences with Sites module. And lastly, you should have an intranet site called the Livingston Loop created. Again, if you've been following the earlier exercises, these last two bullet points should already be created for you. Our use case today is for the Livingston Hotels and Resorts. Livingston wants to collect guest feedback in several areas, including RSVPs for special events and customer satisfaction surveys. Various internal processes require forms that can be easily filled out and transferred directly to appropriate personnel. Just as well, Livingston has various internal processes which will require Liferay forms that can be easily filled out and transferred directly to the appropriate personnel. Relevant key performance indicators. First, Livingston is hoping to increase the level of customer feedback gathered. Second, Livingston wants to improve the efficiency of internal processes that rely on forms. Gathering feedback. In Liferay DXP, forms are entities that are created in order to gather data. The use cases for forms are wide-ranging. Typically, they include surveys, work orders, RSVP forms, invoices, and registration forms. Forms can cover many other cases, but here are just some of the most common examples. Form field types. Forms are made up of a combination of fields. In Liferay DXP, the out-of-the-box field types are paragraph, text field, select from list, single selection, date, multiple selection, grid, numeric, and upload. Just as well, it is specified out-of-the-box field types because Liferay does allow custom fields which can be integrated into the Liferay platform. Once those have been integrated, they can also be included in forms themselves. Form rules. Form rules enable form fields to be trained to perform specific actions. They consist of one or more conditions and actions. Conditions will determine whether the actions are executed. The actions determine what will actually happen once the condition is met. The conditions and actions are linked via and/or logic. The or is saying an action is triggered if any of the specified conditions are met. The and means the action is triggered only and only if all of the specified conditions are met. So this is saying for or, if condition 1 or condition 2 is true, either one is true, the conditions will be met and the action will occur. For the and, both condition 1 and condition 2 must be true in this situation in order for the action to be triggered. Form rules can only be created after a form has been created and its layout has been established. So you must first create your form itself and its layout before you can start establishing the form rules. Conditions. Conditions trigger actions only when their if statements evaluate to true. If the statement returns false, then no action is taken. A condition can be used to check whether a field's value matches the following specifications. A condition can use is equal to, is not equal to, contains, does not contain, is empty, or is not empty. You can see some of the details of what these conditions mean. For example, contains means if a specified value contains another field's value, then the condition will return true. You could say, does this slide contain the word condition? It does, therefore that condition would return true. Actions, show and hide. The show and hide action can be used to display or hide certain fields based on the user input. For example, a permission form, which requires a legal guardian's contact information if the user is filling out the form, is under 18. The legal guardian email field is hidden until the I am 18 years old or older field's value is yes. So, as you can see on the right, we are configuring a rule which says hide the legal guardian email field if and only if the user is 18 years or older, based off of if they filled that field. Actions require. The require action can be used to make certain fields mandatory, depending on the user's input. For example, a permission form which requires a legal guardian's contact information if the user is filling out the form under 18, similar to the last one. In this case, legal guardian email field is required if the 18 years or older field value is yes. So in the previous slide, we added the show action based on the if condition that 18 years or older is equal to no. We'll build upon that and say that the legal guardian email field is required, meaning the field must be populated alongside being shown, as long as the 18 years or older field is equal to no. Actions enable and disable. The enable and disable action allows certain fields to allow or disallow user input. For example, a medical release form that asks the participant to list any known allergies. You'll have two fields, one field with a single section labeled "Do you have any known allergies?" and then a text field listing for known allergies. If the single selection, meaning a checkbox, is yes, then the text field is enabled and the participant will be able to list their allergies. If the single selection checkbox for "Do you have known allergies?" is unmarked or otherwise known as value no, the text field will be disabled and the participant will not be able to enter any values into the text field and will know to move on in their form. Actions jump to page. The jump to page action automatically navigates your specific page to a new page based on the form on the user's input. The jump to page action automatically navigates to a specific page of the form based on user input. This can only be used on multi-page forms. It's useful for forms that contain pages that are not applicable to all users, and this will skip all sections, including those marked as required, on the skipped pages. So make sure that you are not skipping some required fields if they are truly required on those skipped pages if you do the jump to page action. For example, we might have a membership form that includes pages that are only applicable to new members. The form could include a field that asks whether the individual is a returning member or not. If the individual is a returning member, the form could then skip over pages that would only pertain to new members. Actions autofill. The autofill action changes the selection options of another field based on the user input of a related field. The related field is populated with output from a data provider. The data provider must be set up before configuring an autofill rule. For example, we might have an interest survey that matches prospective guests with resorts based on their travel preferences. A data provider could be set up in order to populate the options for a select from list field with resorts that are offering special discounts based on a field being labeled traveling on a budget. Actions calculate. The calculate action automatically populates a numeric field by calculating its value based on other fields. For example, an order form that'll automatically calculate the order's total price based on the item selected. So as you can see on the rule on the right side, the condition is if a product's animal weight is greater than a certain value, the action will calculate the total weight based on some criteria. Form element sets. Element sets are reusable sets of fields that also include the layout and configuration of those fields. These element sets are created using an identical process to creating forms, but these cannot be published. They can be combined with other fields and elements in order to create forms. Element sets can be combined with other fields and other element sets in order to create forms. And element sets are used in the same way as other form elements, such as fields. So basically, it's like templatizing a certain set of fields, which you can include in other forms in your instance of Liferay. Some other useful features of forms. We have translating forms, which means forms can be translated for any locale, supported by Liferay DXP. Form success pages can be created to indicate a successful completion of a form. Help text is text that appears as a subheading beneath a field. This is to provide additional context or assistance in filling out the field. Placeholder text, text that initially appears in a field that is not submitted if left untouched by a user. So it's that text that you'll see in a field, but once you click the box, there was no text actually there in the first place. It's purely visual and just to show. It is purely visual and just for show. To contrast placeholder text, there are predefined values. This is text that still initially appears in the field, but if left untouched by a user, that text will still be submitted. So for this one, imagine the field, it looks populated, and you can click into it and the data will actually be there. Alongside, once you hit submit, if you happen to skip the field and did not change the data in it, that data will be submitted. Dynamic data lists. Dynamic data lists display forms from field sets called data definitions. They provide a tool within the UI for building reusable forms and list-based applications intended for display on pages using templates. Data definitions consist of a form's field types and those field labels and settings. Dynamic data lists are used primarily in the following situations: when you need a way for users to enter data that will be displayed in the UI, when you need to style lists and forms with templates, or when you need to utilize color, geolocation, web content, or link to page fields. Forms and workflows. Forms can actually be incorporated into a workflow in order to create a comprehensive business process. Unique forms can be associated with the different steps of a workflow, with the completion of a form triggering the next stage of a workflow. For example, repair process for resort amenities, the service request form associated with the initial stage, various approval forms associated with the intermediate stages in the workflow, repair form associated with the actual repair service occurring, and then lastly, the repair completion form associated with the final stage of the workflow. So, as you can see, we have a real-world example of us associating each form and certain forms to different steps in a workflow. And we've reached the knowledge check. Forms can range in complexity from a single field to a multi-page questionnaire. Second, form rules enable fields to perform specific tasks and consist of at least one action and one condition. And lastly, groups of fields and their associated configurations which can be used across various forms are known as element sets.